Introducing our official sponsor of D2C Diaries, Motion.
Motion is a non-negotiable part of our tech stack when it comes to performance and performance creative. It's probably the most important in terms of that synergy between performance and creative. And as we know, that has become more and more important. We have scaled brands to over 8 figures in run rate, multiple brands such as 47 Skin, The Essence Vault, Nutrition Geeks, and many more. And if we didn't have Motion, I don't know if we would have been able to do that to the same degree. Let's use 47 Skin as an example. We were able to scale them by over 400% in 3 months, and we used Motion as part of our reporting and optimization process to isolate soft metrics such as click-through rate, thumb stock ratio, hold rate, to be able to drive performance further. Now, as you know, these are the variables that drive a winning creative and what essentially convert into customers. And that is what Motion is so good at. It's great at turning eyeballs into customers. And I think that optimization period and that disconnect that we usually see between media buyers and creative strategists is one of the biggest bottlenecks within this market, and it's usually why brands don't scale and they plateau. Now, that's why Motion has become an integral part of our process and an integral part of the process for most of the brands within the D2C space. The big iconic brands like the Hexclads, the True Classics, and many more, they use Motion every single day as part of their process. Now, if you want to use Motion and give it a test and give it a try, then head over to motionapp.com. That's motionapp.com. You can find the link down below. And if you say that you came through D2C Diaries, they will give you 50% off on your first month. Trust me, don't sleep on this tool. It has been the biggest unlock for all of our D2C brands that we work with. And if you want to hear more, go to motionapp.com.
Ads is such a great example of that, because a lot of the time the things that work are the ones you think won't. And it's like, that'll look so different for each brand.
How'd you find the offsite then?
Good, yeah. Not really done anything like that before, have we?
No.
Just the 7 of us, little leadership offsite. Wilderness Reserve, very nice spot.
If you have a chance to go, trust me, do it. We heard more and more about the story of the plot there when just around who owned it, because it was an absolute behemoth location in the middle of Suffolk, owned by the founder of Foxtons, who sold it for 300 million, I think bought one of the estates, and then it's now expanded to 3 estates. It's like over 30,000 acres.
A lot of very nice houses. I think the biggest one they said was 65 people, which must be a gaff.
Yeah. There was a story, we did some clay pigeon shooting, which I was fucking terrible at.
Lethal.
It was actually really disappointing, but I was really bad at it. But he told us that there was a wedding there, wasn't there, that spent they'd rented the whole place, and it was like cost them over 4 million for the wedding. And it's actually a renewal of vows, not even a wedding. So yeah, there's levels to this shit.
It's good though, yeah.
But yeah, what were your biggest takeaways from that? I guess for context, we took our C-suite there for, I guess, to, an opportunity to ponder, to reflect, and to look, longer term ahead. But yeah, what did you think of it?
It was really good. I think it was really good to like shift environment, spend some time thinking bigger picture, because I think we've got a really clear idea of what the next 6 months look like, maybe even the next 12 months. But then I think getting clear and having some discussions around what's beyond that. And just going around the room and getting people's feedback on how they viewed their 2024, some of the learnings they took, some of the things they thought went well, some of the things they thought went badly, was really useful, I think. Yeah. And quite vulnerable. I think it was compared to it was very honest and
vulnerable.
Very honest and open, which was really productive, I felt, and will definitely help this year. Takeaways wise, I think we had a really successful 2024, like growth wise, but at the same time, especially the back end of the year was quite challenging in different ways. So I think it was again like often you'd spend your time telling clients to do things that you then don't listen to yourself. Like
so true.
Doing less, like we always say, we talk about like doing less better and focusing, and like at times we've probably not lived by that enough. And I think it was interesting just to reflect on that and try and commit to doing more of that this year.
Yeah.
Because we have started off the year very strong, really strong. So it's like we just need to keep that momentum. But I think having too much on people's plates can have a real negative impact.
Yeah, I think that was probably the biggest trend across the room, wasn't it? Like people taking on too much and not being able to, in their eyes, deliver the best work that they could. So I think, if there's one thing we all took away from it, is that this year, more focus, doing less better, as you say, is really, really important.
Yeah, I think like just focus on what really moves the needle, and slowing, like at those points of like making decisions, like really spending more time in like consideration phase before just like plowing ahead with something.
Yeah.
So I do think you can end up like just doing things without even thinking sometimes, like channels, offers, like all sorts, hires, just taking a step back and being a bit more critical.
Yeah, I think, big takeaway going into this year is thinking longer term. Because I think, sometimes we've maybe made decisions that are going to positively impact us in the short term, and we know maybe they don't feel right for a longer term solution, whether that be hiring, something that's going to kind of bring cash through the door in the short term, but then potentially damage us longer term. I think that's a big learning coming into this year.
And just going up, like we've talked about growing up, not out, and I think it's a bit of like a chicken and egg problem, that from my perspective, because everybody wants to grow up, everybody wants to grow up. It sounds very like funny, but everybody wants to sign like less big clients, but it is a marketing and positioning piece in the market, and I think we're now in a position where that is actually possible. I think if we'd made that decision this last January, we'd have ended up not signing very many businesses for a year because we just didn't have that position in the market. But I think with the great work we've done, we've now got that ability to go for those like percentage spend models for creative.
Yeah.
A bit more risk on for us, but a lot more scalable over time. So
yeah,
I think that's obviously something we're working on now.
Yeah, I think like there's a lot of reflection around like things. I think it was very clear that everyone holds themselves to a very high standard in the leadership team, and I think it was a ridiculously good year in many ways. And I think because we always look at the small things, or not, sometimes they are bigger things, but forget about all the great work that we have done. And I think, for example, processes breaking, and us looking at that as a really real negative. But really, if you are growing as a business quickly, and I forgot who said it might have been Bill Gates, I think, but like if stuff isn't breaking, then you're not growing quick enough. And that's just part of that journey. I think especially for us, like hiring across the group, like 35 plus people in a year is pretty nuts. And that is naturally going to happen.
Yeah. The only thing you don't want people is to break is people. Like,
exactly.
Really, and I think people, because everybody in the team, everybody at the leadership level holds each other to a very high standard. I think that can lead to like periods of like burnout and people not policing that within themselves enough. I've been susceptible of it definitely towards the end of last year. I know you've mentioned it before. And there is a bit of personal accountability towards that, but there's also, with how closely we work together, we could all probably be better at spotting it within each other and pushing each other to take those breaks when you need it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we achieved a lot last year, like a pretty crazy year of growth. And I think we'll probably achieve the same this year, but I think we'll be able to do it better. Like, I think we'll be able to do it with, naturally, as you grow, you get more resource. We have the ability to make better resource decisions, but I think we're all better, more mature operators and have a much better understanding of the business that we're running and the market that we're in. So I'm excited for like this year in that sense. I think there is another like couple of months of like a lot. There's still a lot to be done, but I think I can see. I think everybody, when we had this discussion, could see like not the light at the end of the tunnel, because I think that sounds like we're in some sort of like doom and gloom situation. But like, I think we're like one or two more key people away from just having amazing foundations. I think we already have that, but I think we're like one to two. There's 1 to 2 key areas in the business that we've discussed that, like, if we fix those, it'll give everybody at that leadership level so much time back, and it'll make our service even better, and we can then kind of plow on from there, I think, which would be good.
Get that grey hair around the table. We need more of that this year.
Yeah. Well, that's finance. Finance has been a big part of that, but there's still areas of that to fix. But yeah, I think that's a big thing. It's just thinking who that could be and what area. But yeah, it was really productive. Definitely going to do another one.
Would recommend it to all. Yeah, really good. Even just like, a lot of the time you go into those with, we need to be so structured. We need to be doing this on each day, and it has to be very work driven. But I think the more the authentic conversations come out when you're just there chilling with each other in a nice environment. And it doesn't need to be as structured. We were just, I know you planned a few questions for us thought starters, maybe for us to go around the room with, but I think part of it is just, it gives you an opportunity to get out of the hamster wheel where you're only really ever speaking to the leadership team about work on usually a Zoom or Google Meets call. You never really have that opportunity to like bond and build those relationships outside of that. So I think that's also why it's very, very valuable. I feel like I came out of that trip knowing everyone better.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing as well, just forming like relationships with each other. And I think, we didn't really have structured sessions. I literally put together like 10 questions but then we ended up, I think I asked one of them, we had like a 2-hour conversation off the back of it. It's just kind of flows and flows and flows, which was, really productive. Yeah.
Cool. Well, today we're going to have a bit of a back and forth about 2025 trends. I know we're coming up to the end of January, but still very relevant looking at this year, what we're expecting in the world of e-commerce. Some of these are influenced by other sources. I think Motion came out with a great creative trends report last week, which there's a few areas that were nice to see because it backed up some of my predictions for the year as well, and some other new things that I didn't think about. But yeah, we can dive straight into that. Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I thought you were going to start.
I can start.
No, I think I can start. I guess there's. I know we've both put a bit of a list together here. I've tried to come at it from a little bit of like a D2C operator perspective, top level, strategic view of trends. I think like a good place to kick off, because it ties into a lot of the creative bits that we've got on this list, is just that like focus on creative volume being like a real key to success and growth for D2C native brands. Like, I think we've seen it for the last couple of years. Getting success on Facebook, TikTok, these acquisition channels is all around like creative strategy, creative quality. But I also think it's increasingly becoming about like creative volume. That creative volume needs to be backed by like intention and hypothesis. But I do think when looking at how you get the most efficient acquisition out of those ad accounts, it's like, how can you cover as many different creative bases that appeal to as many different audiences possible, with messaging frameworks, objections that drive conversion in action. And I think the brands that can build the best process around that, delivering volume of net new and iterative creatives into their ad account on a weekly or monthly basis, are the ones that will win.
Yeah.
Because I think as you get volume drives quality, I think, as well. Like, I think if you're a brand in the early stages of that process, like I'd always say, like just get the volume up and you'll learn the rest as you go.
Yeah, there was that study, wasn't there, even not relating to ads, but that whole thing of like quantity creates quality. And it's like the photographer experiment where, every person, half the class were broken into, you just have to make one perfect photo in the whole month. The other group has to make 100. And obviously, the volume won in terms of getting the best possible photo off the back of that.
Yeah, exactly. And ads is such a great example of that, because a lot of the time the things that work are the ones you think won't, and it's like that'll look so different for each brand. But creating a high volume of creative across a structured like roadmap of messaging and formats, and covering as many bases as possible, I do think that is like especially for those like smaller brands, or those brands going from like, say you're going from 5 to 20 million, that's your goal this year. I think that is the most important work stream in your business. If you get that right, it can pretty much, unless you run out of stock or you have some existential shock to like demand or supply, like that will get you to your goal if you focus on it enough.
What do you think in terms of like, because you're working across big brands like Tev as an example, in terms of, do you reverse engineer that from the perspective of, okay, you have a revenue target, you've got your MER target, you know how your media mix, what that needs to look like, you're going to set aside 20% of budget or whatever it might be towards testing, and then as a result, you've almost reversed engineered what that volume looks like. Do you approach it in that way? Because I know some do, but then others just go hell to leather on just that volume game.
I think you need to have a creative cost, like you need to have a creative budget. And at times, like we've probably overspent on creative. And I also think that needs to flex as you go through a year. Really, like for us, where we're very Q4 cyclical business, like we are going to invest exponentially more on creative through Q4 than we are in Q1, 2, and most of 3. So I think, you need to be plotting that as a line item on your forecast. And that's why I think like iterative workflows are so important, and getting that balance of like agency support for sort of net new, for like big swings, and then that internal workflow of like, how do we drive iterative volume whilst we're keeping costs low.
Yeah. I think what's key, even when you're playing the volume game, is still being very intense. I say it to my strats, like you still need a thesis or hypothesis as to why you think something is going to work, or what you are actually intentionally doing there. And you can still do that at scale, but I think it's what you said, it's like strategic volume.
Yeah. And I think, that's the thing. Like you need the intention. But I think if you're in that early stage, like do the volume and then figure the intention out second, because because it is a bit, I think it's a muscle and it's a process that the volume gets the learnings to allow you to be more intentional. And a lot of the time you could do that maybe across statics first.
Yeah, statics would be best.
But I think it's mapping out creative resource to like things you want to test. So a couple of really good examples for this right now is we're looking at testing and going deeper into this confidence complement angle rather than price. And then we're also going deeper into over 40s, because we've had some really telling data in that demographic around like LTV of those customers and how much they're worth to us over 12 months. So it makes more sense to allocate more resource there, because if we can make it work and get the creative right in that demographic, which will look different, it'll have a big impact on growth this year. Yeah,
so true. I think what's exciting about that, and it's, brands always need to be looking for this, like how, a product might become irrelevant to one market, but then very relevant to another, and you're almost rebirthing the product as a result. Not that that's happened with Tev necessarily, but, it's like, that's something that David Ogilvy says in terms of like if you can find that new market, it kind of really revives the product and the actual strategy around that. And I think the interesting thing about that is it's a complete flip on essentially what TEB is, right? Like you would never associate that with those older demographics, or you would have thought that the main angle is always around that price and the reduction of price. But that actually comes back to like that whole thing of how generations are very different and how you've got to speak to different generations in different ways because they've got different wants and goals.
Yeah, we've got a quiz on the site that asks like for age, and then after the age question asks for like what's the main motivation, or like basically asks like them to self-identify the key USPs that are most interesting to them. And when you plot out age and those USPs, it's just like a lot of it, you look at it and it's just like that is common sense, but it's like what an older female is interested in is very different to what an older male is interested in from a USP perspective. Then the same as you come down age groups. And that just means that you should be packaging your messaging up differently in those creatives towards those different ages and genders, if you can do it on that sort of granular level. So we're using that data. I think brands often probably don't spend enough time understanding what their most valuable customers look like from these platforms. Like not everybody you acquire through Facebook and TikTok are going to be the same. Like it's not one homogenous individual. Yeah. There can be like really meaningful LTV differences over 12 months from those cohorts of individuals, and like literally just acquiring more of the more valuable customers could shift your LTV by 30, 40, 50% in a year.
Massively. It's the framework is like identify. So who do they believe they are? And I think that positioning is really important because it's not who you believe they are. Who do they believe they are? Emotion. How do they feel? Like what is this making them feel? And then generation. What generation are they? And how do you have to adapt your messaging based on that?
Yeah. And I think, it's really interesting. There's quite common trends across like some of those. I think like as you go up to older females, from the data we've had, it's like they're a bit more like environmental, socially conscious. If you go up older males, it's a bit more like confidence, like, and those are just vastly different, and they can lead to vastly different ad angles, vastly different messaging frameworks. But they're self-identifying that, so it's like perfect data.
Yeah. So interesting because obviously we're doing some external training with our team with Sarah Levenger at the moment. Shout out Sarah. She's a killer. But she was talking about that in like generations and how each generation is like that. So like you say about those like boomers or Gen X, how they really are more, they care way more about sustainability. And it's like, when you get to kind of Gen Zs and even millennials, the reason they are the way they are is because, for example, boomers really didn't give any love to the Gen Xers. It was kind of like, go work it out yourself. There was no empathy. There was no feelings, emotions. That's just not how it works. Then when you get to Gen X, they thought, my parents weren't like that, but that was what I was craving. So I'm going to give a bit more of that to my child, who is a millennial, and so on. So it's almost how, you go down those different generations and they become more empathetic as a result, or how things that have happened, big life events, whether that be the Cold War in America or even things like 9/11, how that impacts different generations in different ways, and in terms of like even going all the way down to like their buying habits and decisions.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But yeah, coming back to the volume piece, that really lines up with that motion report. They obviously did a survey to thousands of brands, and brands have said on average they're going to increase volume in 2025 by 71%, which is pretty massive.
Yeah, it's good for us.
It's great for us.
Great place to increase volume if you need it. It's like, I think they'll do that through a myriad of ways as well. It'll be internal, external. It'll be seeding, gifting. Like I think there's so many ways to increase creative volume through these platforms.
TikTok Shop now.
TikTok Shop.
How you can use that as part of paid.
So it'd just be interesting to see how that kind of develops over this year.
Yeah. Introducing our official sponsor of D2C Diaries, Motion.
Motion is a non-negotiable part of our tech stack when it comes to performance and performance creative. It's probably the most important in terms of that synergy between performance and creative. And as we know, that has become more and more important. We have scaled brands to over 8 figures in run rate, multiple brands such as 47 Skin, The Essence Vault, Nutrition Geeks, and many more. And if we didn't have Motion, I don't know if we would have been able to do that to the same degree. Let's use 47 Skin as an example. We were able to scale them by over 400% in 3 months, and we used Motion as part of our reporting and optimization process to isolate soft metrics such as click-through rate, thumb stock ratio, hold rate, to be able to drive performance further. Now, as you know, these are the variables that drive a winning creative and what essentially convert into customers. And that is what Motion is so good at. It's great at turning eyeballs into customers. And I think that optimization period and that disconnect that we usually see between media buyers and creative strategists is one of the biggest bottlenecks within this market, and it's usually why brands don't scale and they plateau. Now, that's why Motion has become an integral part of our process and an integral part of the process for most of the brands within the D2C space. The big iconic brands like the Hexclads, the True Classics, and many more, they use Motion every single day as part of their process. Now, if you want to use Motion and give it a test and give it a try, then head over to motionapp.com. That's motionapp.com. You can find a link down below. And if you say that you came through D2C Diaries, they will give you 50% off on your first month. Trust me, don't sleep on this tool. It has been the biggest unlock for all of our D2C brands that we work with. And if you want to hear more, go to motionapp.com.
I think on my side, and it's almost like a ripple effect from AI, but obviously there's going to be a massive increase in AI ads in 2025, which almost what that creates is a real craving for raw, real, authentic, personal connections with the brand. And as a result, I think we are also going to see a shift alongside AI where we're going to be seeing more of those ugly ads or more raw anti-ad style creatives that really build that personal connection with the audience. Because, as we're seeing that more and more, we become more, what's the word? Just less trustworthy, I guess, of the creative, as we know that AI is kind of penetrating more and more.
Yeah, I still think there'll be some form of like legislation against AI creative, especially
100%.
especially those led by individuals. I think if you look, I can't remember the guy. Daniel said it on the Incense podcast around like you're not allowed within health and beauty to create AI driven testimonials,
which makes a lot of sense.
Makes sense, and it's like don't produce something you wouldn't want to consume yourself, which is like, I think is just like, it's an argument of like how much more genuine is a UGC creator, but I think it's very, very different. And I do think there's that element of like when everybody zigzag kind of, and you're already seeing that like craving for authenticity and connection to the individuals behind the business, the individuals who are running it, the employees, etc.
Exactly.
I think
so that feeds into then more founder content. That's going to become more important than ever, and more ECG, that employee generated content, because people will be craving that real connection.
Yeah, customer generated, all of that is already working. It's just like going to continue to improve. Like we've had ads that are like 4-minute videos of people telling stories that have done really well recently, that you just look at it and you're like, that just doesn't make any sense that that's working.
Yeah. That Liquid London one is a great example. It's like you'd watch that and say there's no way this is ever going to work as an ad. Like they don't mention the product until 2 minutes in, which is wild. And he's just telling the story about going on a date with a girl, but like really clever, marketing tactics to drive controversy and engagement that he used in there. Like he's like, yeah, went to Starbucks, split the bill, obviously, because I was split on the first day. And like all the comments are just like, what the fuck? Why are you splitting the bill with a Starbucks and all of that? I actually just, side note, saw a hilarious TikTok shop ad the other day, and it was a guy selling like those under desk wire organisers, and he like stood up, and you see his screen, and it just says "I love Diddy parties," and then it just goes under the desk to show it. So like all of the comments are about that, and as a result, it just drove huge reach for the ad. So yeah.
Yeah, it just really got way lower CPM because he was getting hundreds of comments, which is it's funny. Like the engagement baiting, so it does work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how all of the how like brands continue to evolve across all of those mediums, and like how a big part of this year I think is going to be like creative operations in brands, coordination, like that. Obviously, you've got the creative strategists, but I think like creative coordinators and creative ops people who can really build amazing systems to produce thousands of assets a month are gonna. It's a super, super valuable role.
That's just crazy IP because it's logistically so difficult to do at scale.
And a lot of the magic comes in the boring stuff like tagging, sorting, naming conventions, reporting, dashboards. Once you've got it set up, it can churn out a lot of volume. So I think that'll be a big shift this year.
Yeah. What else you got?
I think I've got a few that tied together. We've mentioned creator and founder-led brands. I think we're going to continue to see, and probably in terms of volume, probably a significant increase in like creators who are people with existing attention and audience choosing direct to consumer as a route to monetize. Direct to consumer and community, I think, are the two. You've seen some big players in the space already do it. You've seen like Logan Paul with a clothing brand, Mr. Beast. These people running product businesses. I think it'll get more pronounced this year because I think it's a very proven model now.
I think it's becoming very saturated. So I think where it's going to move to is teaming up more with micro influencers who have much more engaged followings, and it's much more authentic in terms of what that connection looks like. Because I think it obviously depends on the brand and the connection with the audience. But I personally think it's going to go, working with smaller creators who become, invested into that brand and become the face of it with a much smaller engaged audience, but it feels more authentic as a result.
I think that's true, but I think it's hard for that to reach true scale really quickly because I think then you just have to rely on your normal marketing channels. But like the thing with hero influencers, people with really large reach, people with millions of followers, like the attention and awareness they can drive to a brand is worth millions of pounds in impressions if you had to pay for it. And I think the key is authenticity and product quality. Like the proposition has to be super authentic to them as an individual. But I think a lot of those individuals will have traditionally probably chosen other routes to monetize that awareness, monetize that attention. But I think product-led brands is increasingly becoming more common. Like you look at a lot of the A-list celebrity influence, like David Beckham's just done one.
Yeah.
It's a big trend in those. I'm talking like big, like really upper level of influence, and having that creator at the center of it. And then I think the great ones are the ones that can do that, and then also can turn it into like a consistent, steady growth brand. Because a lot of them go through these massive hype cycles and then just can't retain that momentum after launch. So it's a balance, and I think that's a quality of operator problem most of the time.
I think they're two different strategies to solve two different things, essentially. Because when I say working with a slightly smaller, influencer, the whole, like you say, that then comes more down to how you effectively build a marketing strategy around that individual, and they almost become the marketing strategy. Yeah,
you run it. I think we talked about that with Jack, didn't we, on the podcast, where he's building a strategy around the founder and the brand. I think that is the other end. Like that's a different. Like you're coming at it from bottom up, top down, I guess, in those two areas. But I think that will continue to be a trend because I think that we're already seeing that work, and I think it'll just accelerate through this year. Yeah, and then I guess like two other things from like a existing scaled brand perspective. I think we're going to continue to see bigger brands or like brands who have got product market fit, who are growing, pursuing like a more omni-channel approach. And I think omni-channel in terms of like category, market, and route to market. I think over the last like 10 years, D2C has been a business model rather than a channel. And people have talked about it as a business model, like rather than being one way to acquire customers. And I think we've seen like that, a real acceleration in that trend towards omni-channel business again. Over the last 2 years, like Boots taking loads of TikTok brands like Surrey going into retail, we were discussing earlier. Obviously, Holland & Barrett for supplements has always been kind of a pretty common one, but I think we're seeing them penetrate more, like more of these disruptors penetrate more categories, and I think we're going to continue to see that.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think another piece is like brand collabs. I think we're going to see more and more brand collabs into this year. I think, it's a great opportunity and a great way that at very low cost, you can just tap into a very similar audience to what you currently have, or maybe a product or lifestyle that very much lines up with yours. We've seen this with loads of examples. I mean, on a grand scale, you've got like, Skims, North Face, but then on a smaller level and more D2C, even a good example is like Space Goods with Elite.
Yeah.
A protein cereal and a morning beverage, perfect, hand in hand, similar audiences. How can you use that effectively to be able to drive that? And I know even like Pure Sport doing stuff with Represent and things like that, it's a great way to penetrate new markets quickly.
Yeah, I think the interesting things in that collab space is like going after audiences that are hard to reach through other mediums. Like if I was to do a collaboration, I'm not going after like your traditional 25-year-old. Like Pure Sport and Represent, I think, is a bit of an example of that. Great collab, great grit, and like they're not doing it just for the reason that I'm going to say here, but like the people who Pure Sport are going after with that Represent collab, they probably aren't going to struggle to acquire them as customers anyway.
Yeah, because they're already fitness.
Because they're already like on social media. They're aware of Represent. They're probably aware of Represent and have become aware of Represent in the same way that it's likely they would become aware of Pure Sport over time if they just continue to do the channels well. I think where it's really interesting to play in those in that space is like, I think Jack mentioned it on his episode where they worked with this really niche illustrator to make this jewelry collection, and they'd seen a massive success in this very niche community of slightly older people than they would usually target.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting way to think through that, because they are unlikely to be able to just be reached by spending on Facebook or even maybe these other channels. And I think that has a lot of value, and it takes more work to do that than and the outcome needs to be like value extraction that isn't easy to do through other mediums. So I think we'll see a lot of that this year, like working with brands that have like brands working with people or other brands that have like really powerful subcultures.
Yeah. I think, great example of that as well in a slightly different light, but more so because of the barriers from a compliance perspective, is like Club Neuro, ADHD and autism, apparel and community, a mushroom coffee or a product that can't directly advertise to people that have ADHD
that's a good example.
And autism.
It's a really good example.
Getting into the community or doing a collab, knowing that we've got the community of people within that, but they can't directly speak to those people through paid social.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good example, because that's like a traditional like barrier to acquiring that customer base that brand and everybody else who wants to get into that subculture of their customers is facing. So like that partnership brings a lot of synergy in that way, and I think we'll see a lot more of that this year. And that's that kind of just omni-channel approach to acquisition like is something I'm quite bullish on, that like longer term trend back to storytelling.
Yeah.
Like, and back to tradition, like more like traditional approach to marketing. I don't think it's necessarily like an absolute necessity to do that for the next 2 years, maybe even 3, 4. I don't know what that timeline looks like, because I still think the proficiency level of most brands on Facebook and on these core acquisition channels, like there's still a massive way to go for a lot of brands to become like excellent at just making performance creative, and that is going to still drive the majority of the growth for the next couple of years. It's just becoming really good at that.
Yeah.
But once everybody becomes good at performance creative, like where does the arbitrage on Meta then lie?
Storytelling.
That's where I think it goes, yeah. Because
Like
it's
true
like
brand feeling. Like how does it make you feel?
It's like once everybody's creating 1,000 assets a month and everybody's proficient at creative, which will become the case. Like it's like an adoption curve, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's like, well, you've got everybody's distributing the same way, everyone's making the same quality of creative. It's like, how do you excel? How do you stand out in that marketplace? It's like traditional storytelling, it's activations in different areas, which is interesting, like longer term thing to think through.
Yeah, I think that storytelling piece is so important. And, we spoke a lot about it at the offsite this weekend, but that idea of having that mission and then how you translate that through the lens of your content, how that feeds into your values and pillars, and almost your content pillars have purpose. So you attaching that purpose to the pillar, and what you are trying to do with that. The goal isn't always to necessarily go viral, but you almost need the TV shows within the TV channel. And I think you need the main character, like in that story arc, and you need a villain.
Yeah.
So that villain, let's say that your whole mission is around sustainability. The villain is plastic, or heavy producers of plastic, as an example. And it's like, how do you use that story, drive the spotlight behind the main character, who is the founder, who is the creator, that's the face of the brand, and then attach that villain and how you fight against that. And I think there's lots of different ways to do that, but I think that storytelling piece is going to become way more essential.
Yeah, a lot of brands do that just through the disruptor versus incumbent lens. Like you look at, I've said Surrey already on the podcast, but like they're a good example. Like disruptive, environmentally friendly, focused on sustainability versus like Oral-B single-use plastic toothbrushes, like incumbent legacy businesses versus disruptive new operator in the space, and it's worked really well for them.
It works really well, and it even works really well through paid, that like more top of funnel education play. Like a great example is even when Tev creates the villain around the main, the designer fragrances, and how that, that is almost part of the hook. And it's that controversy play. Like it really works in marketing to have that controversy, and how you can then drive that to the forefront of your story.
What that also works on us versus them lower funnel piece, like simple traction. What are the easiest ways for people who are operating in a fairly saturated category with an incumbent is to just us versus them, your new product against it, and why it's better, and you'll sweep up a decent amount of existing demand. So yeah, I think. Yeah, I agree. I think that storytelling is going to become really important, and I think like doing it across more mediums, and that's where I think like the content requirement for paid social is going to really elevate this year, but the content requirement for other channels is going to follow. Like I think it's that whole like non-linear path to purchase, that there's telling like stories across multiple touch points, TV, out of home, retail, offline, online, paid social. Like the brands that can do that the best are the ones that I think will win. But I think within that landscape, most brands should still focus on getting Facebook to really work first, because it's still probably going to be the best channel for new customer acquisition for the next year.
Yeah.
Regardless of all that. It's like get that to a really good level, get that really producing contribution profit, really driving the business forward, and then use that and invest in those other channels above that.
The storytelling piece is consistency. It's a longer term
Yeah.
play, isn't it? Like it's not like a D2C ad where a creative pops and suddenly it can transform your business. Like it's something that it's like genuine reps and remaining consistent with what that organic strategy looks like. And I think we've started to see it with Club Neuro. You know, we've really plastered the mission at the forefront of all of our organic and how that feeds into Liv, who's the face of the brand, and her story, whilst attaching that like vulnerability to it as well, and that transparency. And that has taken 2-3 months of us really driving this strategy, and now the momentum is flying as a result, and it is a longer term play to see that. And like you say, that doesn't always translate to bottom line revenue.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like
top line
you need to kind of eat well both, I guess, top and bottom line. It's like, I think you need to sort of earn the ability to invest in those channels by being really good on the things that pay the bills first, which I think some brands get that wrong. Well, not wrong, but it's like, because there is no wrong way to do it. I think it's more challenging to go like that route first, but can often have a lot of long-term benefits. I think one final like talking point is like what great ecom businesses and service businesses look like, and how that's going to change through this year. I think like the pressure on sort of profitability for the last, like that real shift in like mindset and approach in the industry for the last 2 years has been from growth at all costs to like EBITDA profit at all costs, and that shift towards first order profit or subscription LTV, and like how those things play together to create a really valuable business over time. I think that's going to continue to play out over the next year or two. I think there's going to be like the best businesses are going to be the ones with the highest ability to spend to acquire customers. So best gross margin or best LTV to CAC profiles that gives them the room to spend and just outcompete other people in the market. And I think along with the gross margin on the products, like that shift to leaner and leaner OpEx to give to like retain that ability to spend to acquire customers. So like lower headcounts, variable staffing through peak and non-peak periods, the offshore, the implementation of AI. Like I think all of those will really continue to play out over the next couple of years. And
it's never been easier to be really efficient.
It's never been, I think it's never been easy to start a brand, but it's probably never been harder to get it to like meaningful scale. I think we've said that a few times, and which I do think is true, because it, but yeah, it has. It's never been easier if you've got the expertise to do that. And I think it's interesting to think about that through brand and agency. Just I think AI is going to empower the best agencies to provide even better service whilst growing gross margin, which is a positive for the industry, I guess. But it's just interesting to
it's just going to make it harder to then penetrate because of the competition.
Yeah, 100%. Because I think you naturally, if you have more resource and more data, even more data points, like that helps with building those AI agents, those models that can drive that efficiency.
Yeah, 100%. I think another one, and it kind of plays into that storytelling piece that I'm seeing some big players doing more and more of, is that like long form content play. Like YouTube, I think we're going to see many more brands tackling long form YouTube this year, and it definitely requires a lot more resource, and it's much harder to do, and you need to have a strong personality to do so. But I think, in terms of building better connections with your audience, there's no better way to do that, really. And I think there's a few great examples of that, like, the guys from Nude Project, and I've spoken about this before, really blurring the line between, YouTube vloggers and brand operators. And really bringing people in on that journey. The other one that I've always used as a case study is that See the Way I See. She does these long form YouTube videos, and she really makes you feel part of that journey and that brand, and bringing you through all of the highs and lows as you would with any film. And I think the way I love to look at that is like, you would never watch a film and it just be good the whole way through. Be a boring film. You know, you need to be taken on that emotional journey of ups and downs so you really feel a connection with that founder. And I think that's something that we're going to see more and more of, and how that long form almost becomes the content pyramid for turning that into, 20 pieces of short form content that could either be used as part of ads, organic to help tell that story in different formats and ways, newsletters, etc.
Yeah, I want to start doing that for us as well. I think we've got a, like you said, I think it's possible for most businesses to do that. You just have to commit to do it. I think I think YouTube, I'm bullish on YouTube as a platform. I'm bullish on it as a ad platform as well, because I don't think it's not done well by many D2C brands.
I think it needs,
So it's got a lot of scalability. Like the amount of watch time, the trend on watch time on YouTube and consumption on YouTube is just so up and to the right.
We've got a pretty strong watch time.
Do we? That's good to know. Not doing this for no reason.
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think long form like this is working well for us. It's like, I think there's another level for us to even do more storytelling content around our business.
Yeah, I think the key with any long form content, and that could be the form of a podcast, I think we're seeing it more and more, but not enough brands are even doing things like a podcast, which is probably the easiest type of long form you can do because it's just a conversation essentially. But again, it has to tie back to your mission. And I think every piece of content, as like a paid creative, like you need a hypothesis as to why you're doing it. With an organic piece of content, you need to be looking at through the lens of how am I impacting my mission? How am I relating my mission to this piece of content? And it needs to be relevant to that. So it becomes your anchor as to what you're doing with that. I think we're going to see more of that. I also, just like a side note, like more and more of these like fake out of home campaigns. I think that's going to be a thing that we see more and more, and it'd be interesting to see how that impacts that form of marketing essentially and advertising, because Surreal have done it. There's the example of where they'll like have fake billboards, but they'll put them up on socials and they'll get so much more reach just by faking it and putting it on social than by actually going and paying for a billboard. And then I think even like bigger activations around new products and like, how you can even push that further. And especially with AI now, I think we're going to see that more and more. And a great example is Rimmel. Remember, you see the tube ad where it's like, there's actually like the big, I don't even know. I'm terrible with my makeup, to be honest. But
the eyelash,
what's it called?
The eyelash thing. Yeah. It was like across the top of the tube, wasn't it? The tube had
exactly. And there was like the actual eyelash, and it just went over it. And obviously, complete CGI. But I think now with AI, it's going to give more legs to creativity and fake out of home campaigns and how you can drive that through social.
Yeah, I wonder if that'll be a fad and like. Yeah, it'd be interesting because everybody's going to jump on it over the next 6 months. From a paid social perspective, you're going to get people are going to be doing billboards, just like slapping a static image on a billboard and being like, "Hey, let's go!" And it's like,
I think it's about
the
being
quality
creative.
of execution.
Exactly,
that
like
sets you
anything.
apart.
It's another vehicle in the mix. But how you use that vehicle is obviously important.
Yeah, I've seen some poor examples of that already. So it'd be interesting to see like how the quality is the key, the creativity is the key.
100%.
Sure.
Cool. Well, we better wrap up now. But
good episode.
Good strong episode. We obviously want to be doing more of these kind of just back and forth, more free flowing eps with myself and Ollie. We've got loads coming this year. I think we mentioned it before, but we've got a big, we're doing more filming within events. So, more connection with founders where we can be asking loads of questions in a different type of setting. Do we want to talk about the actual roundtable piece, or should we hold that for the moment?
I think we hold it for now. We need to get it locked in.
Well, we're not going to tell you about that yet, but please give us 5-star on Spotify. It really, really helps. Subscribe to us on YouTube, obviously, leave a comment. We're going to have a big year here on this podcast, a lot of planning around what we want to do and how we want to be one of the best, to penetrate this market from the world of D2C and e-commerce. So all the support is much appreciated, and yeah, we'll see you on the next episode.
Yeah, thanks for watching.